Has Obama helped the process of eradicating racism, or has it in a strange way made it worse?
Made it worse. Made it worse. Look. The Tea Partiers who are controlling the Republican Party stated, and what's this guy's name? Mitch McConnell. Is that his name, O'Connell?
Yeah. Mitch McConnell, yeah.
Mitch McConnell. Their stated policy, publicly stated, is to do whatever it takes to see to it that Obama only serves one term. What is that? What underlines that? Screw the country. We're going to do whatever we do to get this black man. We're going to do whatever we can to get this black man out of here.
But is that necessarily a racist thing?
It is a racist thing.
Is it not just Republicans? Wouldn't they say that about any Democrat
No, because they
president?
would have gotten rid of Bill Clinton if they could have.
But they tried.
They did try, but still. I don't. They're not going to get rid of Obama either. I think they're shooting themselves in the head.
Does it unnerve you that the Tea Party are gaining such traction?
Yes.
Why?
Yes. Well, it just shows the weak, dark underside of America. We're supposed to be better than that. We really are. That's why all those people were in tears when Obama was elected president. Look at what we are. Look at how this is America, you know? And then it just sort of started turning because these people's surface is like stirring up muddy water.
Are you disappointed that Obama hasn't been more aggressive in taking them on?
Kind of. But I so understood that he was trying to hold on to his own promise. That he
would be different to that kind of
thing. He would be president of all the people. He was going to try not to have this.
Wouldn't most Americans now, certainly a majority in my view, love him just to stick a metaphorical bloody nose on his opponents?
I think now you do. Because now you see how hard he's tried and how hard they have fought against him. Yes, that's what we all want to see. We want to see, and he's going to do it.
Like a clown when you watch him in these pictures. I assume they could be totally, not very represented, but he dresses very fancy. There's something about the way he puts himself together that doesn't look authentic. He looks like, I don't know, a wax figure presenting to be a governor or something. I can't quite get it. There's something about it that doesn't add up to me. And maybe it's this Texas BS, this boots and tuxedo thing they do down there. Why does it work? Outside of Texas, let me put it this way, it doesn't travel very well. But why does it work down there?
Well, I think that, he got reelected simply because the Democrats completely messed up. There were 3 candidates running against him, Kinky Freeman, Carol Strayhorn, and then Chris Bell, who was a pretty darn good candidate. But the trial lawyers put their money behind someone other than the more logical candidate. Yeah. And Rick Perry got reelected with only 39%. If it would have been a straight-up one-on-one contest, I actually don't think he would have won. So he was fortunate in that regard. But he plays the Texas thing up, he plays the mythology up, and it has a big appeal in Texas. And this whole business with secession, it really does resonate with a public that is fed up with Washington from this state.
But his ignorance bliss down there, but he's just historically inaccurate. When Texas came into the Union, from the Republic of Texas into the Union, there wasn't any provision which allowed it to secede. No. The provision was that it could break itself into 6 separate states and get 12 senators. Why would he get something as fundamentally important to Texas history as that wrong? Or do you believe he deliberately crafted this secession thing to make him look like a real cowboy? Deliberately was ignorant.
Number one, the public, as you know, doesn't pay close enough attention to these people as we're starting to parse them as they run for public office. Number two is that I don't think Rick really understood what the Constitution said about breaking into 5 states, and he knew that the message of secession was going to be wildly embraced by those Tea Party folks. And guess what happened? He was down by 25 points to Kay Bailey Hutchison when he went out there and spoke to those people about recession, and a week later the guy is up by 10 points over her, and he easily defeats her.
What a
Pass this jobs bill, and companies will get a $4,000 tax credit if they hire anyone who has spent more than 6 months looking for a job.
I like the idea of saying, look, if you as a company hire someone who's been out of work for a long time, or somebody who's in an industry that's really suffered and is not going to recover, if you hire one of those people and you're about to train them, therefore, we'll give you a credit, a tax credit. In our case, it was a $2,000 tax credit. To hire someone like that, give them the training they need, and put them in a real job.
And it will cut payroll taxes in half for every working American and every small business.
But would you be for what he's advocating, at least for now, an extension of the payroll tax cut?
I'm all in favor of keeping taxes down and keeping burdens down on American businesses and employers. I want employers and entrepreneurs to have every incentive to open businesses and to start creating jobs.
And all businesses will be able to continue writing off the investments they make in 2012.
Tax cuts, saying to them, for instance, if you want to buy any capital equipment this year, we're going to let you expense it for tax purposes this year. That puts people to work right away.
The American Jobs Act will repair and modernize at least 35,000 schools. It will put people to work right now, fixing roofs and windows, installing science labs and high-speed internet in classrooms all across this country. It will rehabilitate homes and businesses in communities hit hardest by foreclosures. It will jumpstart thousands of transportation projects all across the country.
There's no question but that investment in infrastructure makes enormous sense for our country. It's good for business, it's good for the economy, and as the governor that watched the completion, well, almost the completion of the Big Dig, I think that was, I don't know how many governors watched that $15 billion project. They do create a lot of good jobs, and they help our economy, the great things.
This is a really fascinating story. We always hear that the reason why middle-class people, poor people don't want to tax the rich is because presumably they think they're going to be rich. And they don't want to have the taxes on them in the future. And apparently there's been a study that shows that this is not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily a function. This is from the National Bureau of Economic Research. And there are differences towards redistributive taxes, not just between countries, but within countries. Countries that are more ethnically or racially homogeneous are more comfortable with the state seeking to mitigate inequality by transferring some resources from richer to poorer people through the fiscal system. In other words, countries where everybody looks like you are more open to the idea of a more progressive tax system that takes more money from the rich and redistributes it down. Now, Tim Weiss, and we've talked about this, has a theory about welfare really becoming a boogeyman when black people had more access to it and more rights in this country. And this study would seem to suggest that that's accurate. And certainly, you know, what we've been talking about with the Tea Party, that's certainly the issue. You know, and certainly if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, and what's that welfare queen coming out of the Cadillac? Social divisions also play a role in determining who within society prefers greater redistributive taxation. In America, black people, who are much more likely to benefit from welfare programs than richer whites, are much more favorably disposed to redistribution through the fiscal system than white people are. 47% of blacks thought welfare spending was too low. Only 16% of whites did. Only a quarter of blacks thought it was too high, compared with 55% of whites. A new paper finds evidence for a more intriguing and provocative hypothesis. Rather than the typical one. Its authors note that those near but not at the bottom of the income distribution are often deeply ambivalent about greater redistribution. In other words, if you are second from the bottom on the totem pole, you want to protect your position as not being at the bottom. They find that, like, when you study to see if you are making minimum wage, you are for it. If you are making far above the minimum wage, you are for it as well in terms of raising the minimum wage. But if you're making just above the minimum wage, statistically, you're more likely to not want minimum wage raised because you want to feel like there are people who are doing worse than you. So economists have usually explained poor people's counterintuitive to disdain for something that might make them better off by invoking income mobility. In other words, Joe the plumber might not be making enough to be affected by tax hikes for people making more than $250 a year, but he hopes someday to be one of them. But this is not the case. Instead of opposing redistribution because people expect to make it to the top of the economic ladder, the authors of this paper argue that people don't like to be at the bottom. Some poor people may be vociferously opposed to the kinds of policies that would actually raise their own income a bit, but that might also push those who are poorer than them into comparable or higher positions. When I hear something like this, I always think of that Todd Solondz movie. What was his? Welcome to the Dollhouse, where the girl goes to school and gets picked on by the bully, and then she comes home and she bullies her younger sister. You know, it's the kick the dog strategy. As long as you have somebody below you, you're okay. Just a fascinating study. Fascinating study. And something I think that hopefully some political strategist somewhere will look at and say, like, how do we deal with this?
As we went up, you know, I talked about being very pro-Israeli, but at the same time being shocked by what Romney said yesterday and also what Perry said yesterday. And Dan Senor also, a pro-Israel. Dan, come on up. We got an extra seat here.
Come on over. Hey,
Well, what we're saying is, even if you're pro-Israeli, what you're doing is you're undercutting the Israeli position, because by cutting off aid, which Netanyahu doesn't even want, you strengthen Hamas.
Well, I also had a couple of Democrats who didn't know how to, who on background complained of the timing of Perry's criticism.
The timing was horrific.
They're like, look, he wants to come and beat us up, is what this person said. Fine. But we're in the middle of a very sensitive period here, trying to see if there's any way they can help Abbas walk this back, who I'm told now would like to try to walk this back, but of course he's got his own domestic political pressure now. You know, as someone said, it's sort of he's leaned a little too far forward on his skis here a little bit, so it is hard for him to totally pull this back.
If he goes home and caves, he strengthens Hamas.
Correct. If he goes, and that's the problem.
It is a zero-sum game.
It's the first
right
time
now.
Abbas has ever felt as if he's got any kind of support from the sort of Hamas part of it. So and then Perry just throws this, stink bomb yesterday, and it was a complicated thing.
Mitt Romney as well, and I guess the most damaging thing about what Perry did, Dan Senor, is that he brought up Israeli politicians to stand behind him. Who, by the way, as you pointed out before, are opponents of Netanyahu's. It was reckless
from the right.
So look, it was reckless and irresponsible, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look. We can debate about aid cutoff and whether it should be used as leverage. Netanyahu's view is, I already have a Hamas state in Gaza. I don't want one in the West Bank. You cut off security assistance to the West Bank, to the Palestinian Authority, I'm in bigger trouble. So I need Salam Fayyad to have those tools. But U.S. policymakers and legislators can debate how to use funding for leverage. But to me, what was most offensive is to bring a foreign national politician, an elected official, and drag them into our domestic politics. That is pretty unprecedented. Look, Israel finds its way.
By the way, Dan, and we have to underline for Americans that haven't followed this closely, at one of the most
sensitive